Let me call the Stillwater Planning Commission meeting of December 17th, 2019 is called to order. We have, I see at my far right, a new planning commissioner. Why don't you introduce yourself and say anything you want to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. My name is Brett Allred. I'm practically a lifelong Stillwater resident. Honored to be a part of the Planning Commission. This is a big responsibility, one that I certainly take very seriously. So look forward to working with you and the citizens of Stillwater to make this community even better than it already is.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Let me go over the process of how we'll conduct business tonight. I'll call the items on the agenda. The commission will hear from the staff report first, then hear from the applicant. Then I will open the public hearing for anyone that is for the item, opposes the item, and or just wants to say something on the item. Then I will close the public hearing, and then the staff will make a concluding presentation, and then we'll allow the applicant to maybe, if there are questions that the commission has, to have them. When you come up during the public hearing, if you'd state your name and address, I would greatly appreciate that. So with that, I will go to the first item of the agenda, which is item 2A, the Sticks, preliminary plat SUB 1919, requesting review approval to create a residential subdivision called the Sticks, creating 19 residential lots and 2 outlots on property currently located on 821 North Main in the residential single-family lot district.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Ryan Harkins, planning staff. The preliminary plat that you have before you is, as you had mentioned, 821 North Main. This is the area in question. You have a revised staff report that reflects additional discussion internally based on current city code and what can and cannot be asked of the applicant and their agent as far as information. So as I mentioned, the hatched area is the property. This may seem similar to what you've dealt with. We had a rezoning case a few months ago that came before you for the same area that rezoned it to RSS. This is the follow-on project that proposes 19 lots. This is the proposed layout. The agent for the applicant is here at this time, and I'm going to let them take the floor and share their project proposal and answer any questions you might have.
If you would state your name and address, I'd appreciate that.
No problem. Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry, here representing the owner tonight. I'm actually going to give you a different copy of the preliminary plat. This updated copy that you're receiving was submitted to city staff on the 10th, and it looked like the first packet that you received, that report was written on the 6th, and so there's been some changes. We had received a comment letter from city staff, and so this layout that you're looking at takes care of those comments, really. So as Ryan mentioned, you have seen this property recently when it was rezoned to RSS. Tonight we're bringing that preliminary plat to you. This property is already platted with 14 lots. We're proposing to replat the area with 19 lots. 6 or 7 of those lots will access the proposed internal street. And I say 6 or 7 because if you see that one that's on the western edge that aligns with Main Street, they actually have access to the proposed street and also an existing west street. So I don't know where their driveway is going to want to be. But so 6 or 7 of those lots will access the proposed internal street along with the existing apartment building that's located to the south. The remaining 12 lots will access the existing streets directly, meaning their driveways will just front out to those existing streets on the north and east sides. I've handed you the revised preliminary plat that addresses the comments received from staff. This layout does satisfy the comments within your report tonight about street width and then the emergency access turnaround. The stormwater drainage design has also been accepted by staff. The external streets on the north and east sides, where 12 of these proposed lots will tie into, are narrower than current city standard. They're on average 18 feet wide. This is 2 foot wider than a city standard alley, which is 16 feet. There are several subdivisions and even a parking garage here in town that access directly to alleys. For instance, Arbor Village has 29 lots that access directly onto a 16-foot wide alley. Camden Pond has another 10 lots. And then one of the Elm Place apartment complexes that has 458 parking spaces in their parking garage, all of those spaces outlet directly onto a 16-foot wide alley. Again, this property is already platted. Currently, there are 14 lots within this property, and 8 of those could apply for a residential building permit tomorrow and directly access those streets. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
you.
I'll officially open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone that'd like to speak in favor of this item? Seeing no one, would somebody like to speak against this item or make any other statement?
I'm Michael Banks. I live at 123 Randolph Court. I provided a letter in opposition to this. I don't know if you have received it or not. Okay. Have you had the opportunity to read it?
I did. I don't know what the others.
Okay. Well, I'll be glad to read it to you. Okay. At this time, approval of the Sticks LLC preliminary plat, hereinafter referred to plat, would aggravate an already substandard street and a sewer system infrastructure. The track in question is located between Main and Lewis, north of McRoy and south of Tyler, in the Watson Heights Edition, blocks 4 and 5. The city accepted the original plat in 1946 with several deficiencies. These streets were unpaved, and only the west half of Lewis Street was included in the dedication, and it's still not. Full access to McRoy was permitted southbound from both Main and Lewis Street. However, at a later date, the city restricted access from Main Street to a single right turn lane for Boomer Road. This left Lewis the only access to McRoy. The city laid substandard asphalt on Tyler and Lewis in an attempt to improve the road conditions because they were dirt at the time. These streets are both narrow and in extremely poor condition. The construction equipment and increased occupancy usage will cause these streets to be in even greater constant need of repair. Egress from the neighborhood is very difficult. McElroy and Lakeview are the only thoroughfares to travel east. This makes the Tyler and Lewis a significant thoroughfare for local residents to access McElroy. In addition, many drivers departing the Stillwater High School use this access to avoid congestion caused by traffic lights at Boomer and Husband, Boomer and McElroy, and at Lakeview and Perkins. West Tyler is a one-way street from Boomer to Main Street, that's coming in, and Hartman Avenue, which is a block north, is a two-way street between Main and Husband Street. The residential lots on Hartman are larger than those in the plat, and yet is congested with off-street parking on both sides of the street. that makes it difficult and hazardous for through traffic. The last option is north on Main to Redbud to Husband to reach Lakeview or Boomer. The subject property is close to Oklahoma State University, Boone Pickens Stadium, Stillwater High School, and shopping. It is a desirable location for college students. This housing will be prime rental property or short-term owner-occupied property. To maximize value, many houses will be built to house as many college students as possible. College students love to congregate, to study, to socialize, and many staying overnight. Each will have a vehicle in need of a parking space. They will be forced to park their vehicles on the street, adding to the congestion and creating a driving hazard. Recently, 911 North Main, and that was the cutout part, was converted from a single family to multi-family use. This property has limited off-street parking to accommodate the tenants, much less their frequent guests. The tenants and guests park on both sides of Tyler, blocking or restricting traffic. In addition, they park on the property subject to this plat. For example, at 4 a.m. on Thursday, December the 12th, 14 vehicles were parked in the area, some on the street, others in the plat area. Later that night, 16 vehicles were parked there. As many as 22 vehicles have been seen. A few pictures are attached for your consideration. On occasion, vehicles double park in the drive with the rear of their vehicle sticking a quarter of the way out into the street. What would cause the plat area residents to be any different? In addition, for the past several years, the city has explored various remedies for the sewer collection system to allow for increased demand. As I understand, the city still intends to redo the sewer that runs down Lewis Street. This remedy should be completed before any construction begins on the plat property. The plat implies that the lots may be sold and improved individually. This leaves a couple of unattached tracks, outlets A and B. These would be subject to poor maintenance and upkeep, and therefore these outlets should be attached to adjoining lots. The redevelopment should be held to the same street infrastructure requirements as new developments. Today, it is doubtful the city would accept the original Watson Heights addition without paved streets. The plat indicates a small area on the intersection at the intersection of Tyler and Lewis is paved. I understand the developer has opted not to pave their share of the street. And this should be unacceptable. We appreciate the removal of the trailer court. It was an eyesore, but it had plenty of off-street parking to accommodate the residents and guests. The access was limited to two ways, one on Tyler and the other on Lewis. The plat has 12 lots, which will have driveways on Tyler or Lewis. Frequently, residents from other lots will use Tyler and Lewis to access McElroy. All of this will add to the congestion and increase the driving hazards on Tyler and Lewis. If the street is necessary, then the right-of-way should be wider to accommodate unimpeded two-way traffic. I recommend the Planning Committee deny the approval of the Sticks LLC preliminary plat until the city obtains the right-of-way for the east half of Lewis Street from McElroy to the north edge of Watson Heights addition. The city completes the infrastructure to accommodate the addition with final resolution for their concerns. The city and/or developer brings Tyler and Lewis Street up to city standards for paved streets. The city eliminates all parking on both Tyler and Lewis. The city eliminates street parking on Main from McElroy to Hartman. The developer modifies the plat to provide adequate parking for 911 North Main. The developer modifies the plat to eliminate Outlet B by attaching it to Lot 5 or to 911 North Main. And the developer modifies the plat to eliminate Outlet A by attaching it to lots 14 through 17. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Bank? No questions? Does somebody else want to speak on this particular item?
Yes, I've got some concerns. My name is Jim Brown. I live at 3815 Eagle Creek. I own the property at 815 North Main, which butts up against the proposed street. My first concern is that I do have a private drive easement where the street is proposed. I don't own that property. It's the easement provided for me to allow my tenants to access my apartment complex. On top of that, the street would be cutting through part of my parking lot, so it would be eliminating potentially a parking spot and some vegetation. If that is allowed, also there's been some modifications to the street, which I guess would allow for a fire truck to back out. I guess they call it a hammerhead. If that's allowed, I think that should extend to the end of my property so that fire service or emergency vehicles would be able to access all the way to the end of my property as well. And without having a map, it's a little difficult for me to show you what my concern is on that, especially since it's changed. I haven't necessarily seen the changes. I do know that a hammerhead was put in there, but my concern is I would like it to be pushed further east if that has to happen. Also drainage, our driveway is kind of low, and I know that water will run from the street down towards us, and we're kind of looking at, let's see, I'm trying to see what it's called. A mountable curb where it attaches to my driveway. Also, my driveway will have to be saw cut for the street and the curb to be put in. When you cut concrete, you usually have a smooth surface, something that you can pin or attach. With asphalt, you can't do that. When asphalt is cut, it seriously degrades the asphalt and it crumbles. So I'm concerned as to how that would affect my driveway, my parking lot, and the access that I have. Also, the drainage does go east, and then I think that it turns back to the south, which also comes around the south side of my property. So I'm concerned about how that drainage and vegetation will affect our buildings and such through that side. Let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's about it. I do have one other issue. By putting the street in, it puts my buildings really close to the street, and I think it would make, from what I understand, the building that I have on the west side, it would make the side yard, which is now actually a front yard. And by doing so, if we had a fire or something that would cause part of the building to have to be reconstructed, now we would lose a unit or two, because I think under city code, if the front yard, the building has to be about 20 feet back. And so it would adversely affect that if I were to have some kind of issue, especially with the city as far as rebuilding or construction or anything like that. So I have a lot of concerns that I'm not for sure how to get answered, which is a lot for you.
Any other comments? Any questions?
Can you repeat the address of your rental property?
815 North Main.
Okay, thank you.
So I would be on the south side of the street directly. And so I'm not for sure how that would be designed to keep that water or any of that from coming onto me. And not only that, the traffic flow, as the gentleman said earlier, there is a tremendous amount of parking going on at the house that is the street. It is an issue coming onto Lewis to try to access McElroy. And I'm concerned that I would be the overflow in my parking lot, as I am for the legal marijuana place next door. I'm the overflow for them as well. So kind of running out of parking. So
Thank you for your comments.
thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak on this particular item? Not seeing anyone, I would like to close the public hearing. Does the applicant want to come up and make any statements?
Yes, thank you. So to address the sanitary sewer in the area, the city is currently working on plans to reconstruct that existing sewer and enlarge it, as I understand. I saw a partial set of those plans as I was determining where we would tie in our proposed sewer for the site. And so I know they are working on that improvement.
Is there a time frame for that?
I am not
So
aware
it's
of the time frame.
To be determined?
Yes. Of course, we would fix any damage to the existing streets to their current conditions as part of the construction process. Let's see. I believe the existing structure that you've heard that there are quite a few cars at is located at that, let's see if I can get this plat to show up, at that northwest corner. This lot, I believe, probably is what they're talking about. It is quite a large house. I don't know how many rooms are in there or if it's actually an apartment building. I'm not sure. We are proposing small lot, single-family housing, so there wouldn't be any houses anywhere close to this size within the development. I imagine, and I don't know the city's policy on this, but us adding no parking signs to the project for the existing streets north and east, even to the west, if staff determines that's needed, can be added to the project. We can install those no parking signs. That way, all the residents have to do is call code enforcement, and they would come out and be ticketed. So the outlots, there is one outlot that's adjacent to that northwest corner property. That's due to they already have some of their improvements built on that area, and so that lot will go with that property. So that outlot is already designated, and there's a note on the preliminary plat, and there will be on the final plat that outlot goes with that lot.
What lot?
This lot that's not included in the plat.
Okay. So that lot will be owned by the owner of the northwest lot.
Correct. The other outlot is this area, kind of in this corner area, and then circles around. That is due for drainage. This whole site does drain from the northwest to the southeast. So the streets will collect all the drainage from coming in from that northwest area and direct the water into this channel area. There's already an existing channel really in there. We'll be maintaining that. That will be dedicated to the homeowners association, so it will be their responsibility for upkeep of that outlot. So we did speak to the apartment owner to the south. That was the last gentleman that was up here. As part of that revised plat that you have in front of you, we did extend that emergency access turnaround to the corner of the property. That's actually longer than the access turnaround code requires, but it was just slightly longer, maybe 9 feet. So we went ahead and included that in the plan. There is an existing street, currently located in exactly the same location as our proposed street is. It is slightly narrower. I believe it's 24 feet wide currently. I don't believe it has curb and gutter. We are putting in a new street in the same location using the same curb cut off of Main Street. It will be 27 foot wide with curb and gutter. It is a mountable curb. So this street pavement gets 3 feet closer to the apartment building that is located, here, if you can see where my cursor is. That apartment building, if it were to burn down and his building setbacks, his property line is not changing. So that issue of being able to rebuild is really an existing condition. And I don't know, I haven't reviewed code to see how that would play out. If he would have to go to the Board of Adjustments in order to rebuild that building in the same spot, or if there's something allowable in code for him to rebuild that in the same spot. There is an existing private driveway agreement that is located. It pretty much follows the center line of our proposed street to the south, and it joins along his property line. So it's not as wide as what we're proposing, so he would have access to a public right-of-way instead of just a driveway easement, and that would overlay his easement, and he would just have access to the public road. We are proposing the mountable curbs so that the drainage will continue to flow to the east, and so we're intercepting the flow and redirecting it east so that it won't continue south onto his property. I think I hit all the notes that I tried to make as we heard. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Staff, you want to get up?
Point of information, Mr. Chair. Could staff see what you were handed for the plat?
There were some extra ones over there. They should be able to give one of the extra ones so you don't lose yours. I'll give them that.
Okay, so with regard to findings, the preliminary plat meets subdivision and zoning requirements. Specifically, if they're under 30 lots, they're not required by code to have 2 points of access. There's a point of access to the interior lots that is noted on the plat. The comprehensive plan recommends high-density residential in this location. Staff is noting in the findings that what is proposed is more of a single-family detached, which is fairly similar in this part of the community. The density is in alignment with the RSS zoning requirements, but not those of the R2, RT. There's a mix of zoning throughout surrounding parts of the community here, but this particular parcel is zoned RSS. The fire department has asked for that turnaround at the end of the interior street to allow emergency vehicles proper access. Staff is noting in the findings some alternatives to that as ways to do it as well. They've extended that to a hammerhead toward Outlot A. With that being said, your alternatives are that you can accept the findings and approve the proposed preliminary plat as it's been presented. You can accept the findings and approve this plat as proposed with conditions. If you feel necessary, you can reject the findings and deny the proposed plat. Or as an additional alternative, if you feel there's additional information or discussion to be made, you can defer the item and make your decision later, but table the request for the approval of the plat to a certain date. No, we would note, however, that action must be taken within 60 days of the public hearing. Of course, I could be wrong.
Any questions of the staff?
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Question. Can you walk me through again, and I apologize a little.
That's okay.
I apologize, a little overwhelmed. Can you walk me through again what happens to the road on Tyler and Lewis? I drive that road all the time. It is absolutely awful. Is the applicant responsible? Is the city responsible? Are you working together to make improvements to that?
So, regarding Lewis and Tyler streets, those are considered local streets. They do not meet current city standards.
Yeah.
So any improvements would need to be done through a special assessment district where the adjacent property owners pay for the improvements. Part of that.
Streets are outside the development.
Yeah.
So the city has no control or purview over those as part of this plat. So it couldn't even get there if you wanted to at this point.
So if I understand you correctly, the streets as is would remain as is. There would be no improvements.
That is correct.
From the city. The applicant would provide no additional funding to.
That is correct. Because the streets already exist and the plat is outside of the street right away.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions staff can answer?
Any other questions of the staff? Thank you very much. Discussions and or motion?
Well, I don't, if we think about this development from the outside in, the interior road and the platting seems reasonable to me. It's these, call them lots on the outside that are going to have driveways throwing onto Tyler and Lewis that I have some concern with. Obviously, I've always been concerned about private roads, who takes care of them, things fall apart, people buying properties, things of that sort. So in that regard, I have some concerns, at least on those parts. So think about looking inside, looking outside, problematic. So I think that would be the concern that I have.
Yeah, I agree too. I have serious issues with the street infrastructure surrounding the development. And there'll obviously be increased usage as a result of the ensuing development. I also have an issue with it. There is no definitive time frame when the sewer infrastructure will be improved. So based on those two, I think it's problematical at this point in the process.
I feel the same. I drive that occasionally, not often, but I do drive the Tyler and the Lewis Street direction, and it's terrible. The streets are terrible. I also take the Hartman Drive quite often and cut across there, and it's difficult to get through that street at times because they're parked on both sides of the street.
So I have a legal question. Can we turn this down because these streets are in poor condition and the developer isn't responsible for this since the right-of-way's already been previously given? Is that a rationale that we can turn this down for?
Not for the streets that are outside the proposed development. There's nothing in the code now that gives the city any control or authority to do anything about those outside streets.
Even if the houses have driveways that lead onto those streets?
Yes. There's nothing in the code that would allow us to control that.
So my perspective is this. It's been zoned. This meets the zoning, meets all the code. The internal street meets all requirements. The drainage meets our requirements. The streets are outside our purview. The sanitary sewer, if it's inadequate, then a building permit will not be given until it is adequate. To me, there's no alternative except to vote yes on this one.
Legally, yeah. I see what you're saying.
Clarifies it.
Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yes.
Can staff approach the podium and
Yes.
tell us again what our options are one more time, please?
Yes.
Is that
Absolutely.
defer, accept as is?
You can accept as is. You can accept if there's conditions that you feel
I see.
need to be met for approval. So a conditional approval, if there's additional information you think needs to be added, for example, like an easement or something like that. You can reject the findings and deny the proposed preliminary plat. You can find that additional discussion or information is needed and table the item to a certain date. Code how it stipulates that if action isn't taken within 60 days, that of the preliminary of the hearing, public hearing, that the plat is considered approved. So those are your options and your alternatives. Any other questions staff can answer?
Excuse me, sorry.
No,
for
that's
my-
okay.
For my ignorance and my being a freshman here at the table gives me an excuse. So if we want to propose the conditions, who proposes those conditions? Us, city staff, the applicant? How does that process work?
That would be you would be making a motion to conditionally approve the plat, and then you'd want to stipulate the conditions that you're adding on.
I see.
So I'll give you an example. If you feel a lot in a proposed plat needs additional easements, you would want to say that you're move to approve conditionally, and then stipulate that easements be provided on lots 1, 2, 3, for example. Something like that.
But since it meets all code,
You-
as is, there's not much we can ask them
You're going to have to ask legal some questions, but you can't go above the requirements. You can't do something that's not legal.
The conditional approval would be if you think something is missing and needs to be added in order for it to meet current code requirements.
which it already does meet current code requirements. So there, yeah, I'm with you. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Fair enough. Okay. So it sounds like the applicant's done everything within their legal jurisdiction, prudence, to present this in front of us. Is that, attorney, is that what I understand? Correct? Yeah, that's more or less.
That's your call. I can answer legal questions.
Yeah.
Whether or not they've met their requirements, that's their application to you.
I believe they met all the requirements.
Yeah.
If you have a motion to deny, in my opinion, you have a rationale
Yeah.
for that motion.
Then I make the motion to accept the findings and approve the proposed preliminary plat as presented.
I'd second that.
Call for the vote.
We don't have a choice. So.
There are 4 yeses and 1 abstain. The motion passes. Item 2B, RSR OKC North LLC Crafton Tulsa Sussex preliminary plat SUB 19-20, requesting review and approval of preliminary plat creating 182 residential lots at property currently addressed is 1998 West 32nd Avenue. It's currently zoned residential, single-family lot, and agriculture.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is a proposed preliminary plat for an addition called Fry Farms. It's at 32nd and Western. You can see the hatched area here includes part of the tract. This is the part that is being proposed for actual buildable lots. You can see an aerial view of the same part. And then this is the proposed plat itself. You can see on the western half where the proposed lots are laid out. You can see in the eastern part where it is left open as common area. At the present time, in the review process, staff has issued a comment letter with a number of issues to be discussed. The applicant has asked for a deferment of this item until the first meeting in January in order to address all of staff's comments. So staff would ask the commission to make a motion to defer the item at this time.
Since it's on the agenda, do we need to open a public hearing on this item?
Vote on deferment, do that, and then just automatically moves out to the next day.
Do I hear a motion to defer this item?
Motion to defer.
I second that.
January 7th, I believe, is the date.
Yes, to January 7th.
January 7th, 2020.
Call for the vote. Motion passes 5-0. This is deferred till January 7th. What I'd like to do without objection from the Planning Commission is read item 2C and 2D, because to me they're companion items. Then I'll have the staff make the presentation on both items. The applicant make a presentation on both items. Then I will open a public hearing on 2C and get all comments on 2C and then close it. Then open a public hearing on 2D, hear all comments and close that, and then get back with the applicant and staff and do a separate motion on 2C and 2D. So without objection, I'll go with that procedure. Item 2C. Beta Psi of Gamma Phi Beta Incorporated, map amendment MA 19-09, requesting review and approval to rezone property addressed as 302 South Walnut Street from residential single-family lot to office. Item 2D. Gamma Phi Beta Incorporated, specific use permit SUP 19-29, requesting review and approval of specific use permit to allow construction of a new parking lot at property addressed as 302 South Walnut Street.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm going to pull up the slide for the SUP so that you can see pieces of information together. The hatched area is the proposed development. It again is at 302 South Walnut. There was a similar case a couple of months ago for a straight map amendment for rezoning. The applicant is coming back with this proposal at this time. You can see the subject property and the hatch pattern on the aerial. You can see the lot in purple is the subject property. They're separately with two different requests asking for the rezoning through the map amendment process as well as the specific use permit. With that, I'm going to invite the agent for the applicant to come forward and present their project to you and the parameters of it and answer any questions you might have.
If you can state your name and address, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry, here representing the owner tonight. As Ryan mentioned, you've seen this property before as we requested to rezone to multifamily in order to construct a parking lot for a sorority, Gamma Pi Beta. The concerns that we took away from the previous application was that a multifamily zoning was not desired in this area. It was a concern that in the future, this zoning could be expanded and have a larger tract of land added to this property than an actual multifamily development could have been constructed. However, you would have seen those properties come through and they would have had public hearings as well. But the other concern that we heard was drainage in the area. So tonight we are requesting the office zoning, which requires us to turn in an SUP for a parking lot. This will lock in the use and the layout so that everybody knows what's going to be constructed. We want to be upfront with our proposed use of the property, and the SUP process is the only way to do that. Parking lots are normally associated with a primary structure. In the populated areas like downtown and especially around campus, the need for standalone parking lots is high. As it was mentioned last time, there is already a parking lot in the block located to the south. The zoning on the west side of Walnut, across from that parking lot, is a lower density classification than the zoning located on the east side of Walnut from us. It's a higher zoning classification across the street from our property. The higher density areas are in need of parking lots as well. This sorority happened to be lucky enough to find a property within a half a block of their main house. This will ensure that their residents will actually park there instead of on the street, and it will be a safer walk for them. The comprehensive plan indicates high-density residential, which is what is located on the east side of Walnut. Parking lots are an associated use for high-density residential. This property is surrounded by a mix of residential properties. To the north and south on our half of the block is RSS, but as I looked through the county assessor's website, there is not one house on that block that is owner occupied. So they are essentially all being used as low-density multifamily. To the east, across the street is RMI, with RTM residential two-family, multifamily to the south, basically across the street from that south parking lot. To the northeast of that intersection is public, that's where a park is, and then to the west is RSS Westwood Overlay District. It states in the packet, and this may be left over from the previous time we brought you a zoning request, but that a site plan was not provided. There was one. It's a requirement of the SUP to provide a site plan. It has been reviewed by staff, and it's my understanding that we have addressed all of staff's comments. Our site plan, I didn't see that Ryan showed you that, but I think you have it in your packets. We are proposing to use screening fence. It's just a 6-foot tall wood.
Staff, is the site plan, do you have the ability to put that up on the screen?
I thought we had that at one point.
I've got a copy. I was more interested in the public, in the audience,
No.
to see it.
No, it didn't save in. Our staff's
Okay.
apologies.
Thank you.
I can describe it. So we do have one entrance off of Walnut, 24-foot wide, with a drive aisle and then 14 parking spaces that are perpendicular spaces along the south side. We are proposing a 6-foot tall screening fence along the property line, all three sides, the north, west, and south sides. On the east side, that will wrap around the edge of the parking lot. However, that's in what you would call the front setback of a residential lot, so it's only allowed to be 4 foot tall within that front area. But the rest of the property will be surrounded by a 6-foot tall fence, which is standard in a residential area.
Address drainage for me.
I will. Let's see. So I'll get to that in just a second.
I am patient.
Okay. We could have proposed more parking spaces using angled spacing and parallel parking spaces within this area, but it would have caused the residents to have to back into Walnut and then go either north or south. So the owners have opted for this 14 parking space lot so that they're able to back out and within their property and just pull out like normal onto Walnut Street. In regard to drainage concerns, we are providing stormwater detention within the parking lot. There will be a curb cut in the southwest corner of the parking lot. This will allow for water to drain from the site in a slower manner. This design has been reviewed by city staff and accepted. I will mention that we're talking about 1 CFS during the 100-year storm. This is compared to the 300 CFS that is being collected in 4th Avenue, which is the street to the south of this block. I know I was surprised to see that amount of runoff within the streets in this area, and we will not be adding to any of that increase of street flow with this project. The proposed curb opening varies in width from 8 inches to 1.5 feet wide. That varying width is so that we can decrease the flow rate for every storm event, from the 100-year storm event to the 1-year storm event. The expected flow, again, from this curb opening will not cause any rutting or disturbance downstream. That site currently drains to the southwest where we're having our curb opening, and we won't be changing that drainage flow because the only other way to change that drainage flow would be to outlet to the street, and as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to add any more flow to the street. Again, we are providing detention and not increasing the amount of runoff in any direction from the site. Do you have any questions?
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant?
Thank you.
Hearing no questions, I'd like to open the public hearing on item 2C, which is review and approval to rezone property addresses 302 South Walnut Street. Is anybody in the audience that'd like to speak in favor of the rezoning? Would anybody like to speak in opposition to the rezoning or make any other statement associated with that? If you'd approach the podium, give your name and address, I'd appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Tanya Sharlock Nash, and I live at 1625 West University, which is the house located at the corner of University and Orchard Street. I was somewhat surprised that the same issue is coming up again after only 60 days. I was also surprised to receive 3 business days notice as to the hearing. As a mother, as a Westwood parent, and as a person who tries to do a lot for the neighborhood, I cannot speak strongly enough at the damage that this parking lot would do to our neighborhood. Westwood is a fragile neighborhood. That is why we have the overlay. It is a mix of rental properties and of single-family houses. We are happy to play host to homecoming. We are happy to keep up historic houses. We are happy to clean up the trash. We are happy to preserve so that Stillwater can be what we say it is in the magazine, America's most beautiful college town. And to have a parking lot directly behind us in our backyards is not something that will allow our neighborhood to thrive or even survive. College students, I love college students. Some of these sorority girls are my students, and I wish them well. I have no animosity towards them. I understand they're looking simply for a solution to park their cars. But to back it into our neighborhood kills one more street. And then another street, and then another street, and then another street. How can the families continue to live with the noise, with the trash, with the flooding that's going to back up into our yards? When this is zoned office, then the next person who sells a house can say, office, okay, great. We'll put an office here. Then another thing is gone. This, to me, is sad. It's really sad. I love my neighborhood. I didn't grow up here, but I really love it. And I would like for it to continue to be a place that I can be proud of raising my family here as Oklahomans and as people from Stillwater. I understand they just want to park their cars. And I would hope that it would be possible for us to work together, perhaps with the architecture and engineering students, or some creative way to think where they can have their needs met of parking without destroying our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
How you guys doing this evening? First of all, appreciate what you all do as servants of our.
Can you start out with your name and address?
Yeah, I'm Johnny Rogers. I live at 1902 West University. I've lived there for over a decade. Okay, so this is the way I see this problem. I've lived in Stillwater 20 years. I was a Greek, and I've served the Greeks not only as a student, but also I've been on housing corporation boards, and I know how the businesses work. I do know that historically and today they have a parking problem there, and they will continue to have a parking problem until they start to work together for a viable solution. I know Gamify is building onto their property right now. The question that I have for the city was, what are the restrictions on permits for building when you don't have parking spots for beds? So, buying a property and then after the fact, wanting to rezone and change a whole area for the interest of one party, it's good for Gamify, but is it good for the city of Stillwater? Is it good for Westwood? It's not good for Westwood. It's certainly not good, I think, for that area of town. You're changing the whole landscape of an area by putting an office there. And I don't know about y'all, but I wouldn't want to live next to an office. I just wouldn't. So I think what really needs to happen here is the city needs to engage the Greek neighborhood community and come up with a real plan to fix their parking. Because, as you know, Oklahoma State University is going to continue to grow. These houses are going to continue to meet student demand. I know their classes are a lot bigger than they were 20 years ago. And frankly, I think the university needs to help too. They get a lot of benefit from the Greeks, not only attracting students to OSU, but also giving them a place to live. So there's a benefit there as well. And I think that there's space available in the Greek neighborhood to where this problem gets addressed by the people that live there. Please, I urge you not to think long term here. This neighborhood, since I've lived there, has certainly changed. We've invested in the neighborhood in a new school. We have people investing in properties on Orchard Street and renovating these historic homes. And don't stop the momentum that's going there just for the interest of a short-term problem, because I think a long-term solution is what's needed here. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your comments. Come on up. You know the drill, name and address.
That's right. My name's Gabriel Cook. I live at 301 Orchard Street with my wife and 3 young children. I was here, first let me thank you guys for your time tonight and for giving us a chance to speak. I was here just a couple months ago with my concern about putting this parking lot behind us. My property is directly behind where this parking lot would go. And I brought my concerns last time about the privacy issue, especially if it were to go to go from residential to business zoning. If they ended up not needing this parking lot in the future, if things get fixed somehow, some other way, they don't need this, it turns into a business. They put a 5-story high-rise here. We talked about the last time they wouldn't even have to come back to ask the committee's approval on that they could put a five-story high-rise there. The 6-foot fence that would go around is clearly not enough to make that border that we need to protect our neighborhood from the rest of that street behind us with the noise and traffic and everything else. And I drove down after this meeting the last time. I drove down that street to see where exactly that parking lot would be. And I couldn't figure out where it would be because I couldn't see my house. I knew it was directly behind my house, so I was looking for my house to see where that property was, and I couldn't see my house because of the house that's there currently in that lot. But if you tear down that house, you put a parking lot there and a 6-foot fence, and a 6-foot fence stands about right here. I can see over a 6-foot fence myself. You can look directly into the back of my house, which is it's a 2-story house there on Orchard. But anybody that was driving by, in that parking lot or whatever, is going to get a full view of the back of my house, where my kids' bedrooms are at. And so I'm sharing my concern because I think, the houses that are being built in that area, they have not taken into account the effect that it could have on the residents around that area and the residential properties there, including my family. And I would ask that the planning committee or the zoning the commission here would take into account that concern of the residents in that area. I have confidence that you guys will do what's right for the residents of that community, and I think you'll see with everything considered that putting a parking lot there would be a bad idea. And looking long term, you get this lot in there, and then it becomes the second lot, and then the third lot, and then pretty soon that whole street is now parking lots, or maybe businesses or offices. And when I bought that house there on Orchard Street, I never imagined that I'd have to be, coming up here every couple months to fight, somebody trying to put a parking lot right directly behind my house. So I just ask that you guys consider, our privacy and preserving what we have there in that neighborhood. And I appreciate you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak on item 2C? And if you don't want to speak on it, you'll have plenty of opportunity to speak on item 2D.
Good evening. Jim Beckstrom, 2218 West 4th Avenue. Thank you so much for what you do for Stillwater. I know you're in here regularly, I don't know, every month, a couple times a month, and I know it's a lot of big commitment on your part, and I really appreciate it. I was on the parking committee, Stillwater Parking Committee, almost 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 8 years ago. And we hired a consultant, City of Stillwater hired a consultant to look at the parking issues in Stillwater. And one of the big challenges in that study was to look at the parking challenges within the Greek community. That report actually recommended almost a dozen remedies to the Greek community, and actually some of them weren't mentioned that have already been brought up tonight, which really allude to a broader solution of the community working together. But I will read one interesting point. It's actually expressly written in page 60, let me see if I get the page number here, 62 of the parking study that was done for Stillwater. And I'll just read it for you here. When adding surface parking in and immediately around the Greek neighborhood, while adding surface parking in and immediately around the Greek neighborhood could be an option, removing houses to provide up parking lots in the neighborhood surrounding the Greek neighborhood should be discouraged. We had a consultant who specializes in parking. And I know, because I was on the committee with him, that he has a pretty good understanding of what neighborhoods are all around. Generally, his consensus were parkings are generally bad for neighborhoods. And that's exactly what this recommendation came from in a report that the City of Stillwater actually paid for to have a consultant give him advice on this. So I ask that the council, that the commission take the recommendation from the parking consultant and apply that in their decision making here. Parking lot here and anywhere along Orchard is going to be bad for us. And so please do the right thing. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak on item 2C? Yes, sir.
I'm John Fields. I live at 1615 West University. I'm just going to read to you some notes that I wrote before I came. I hope they are concise enough. I think when we talk about adding a parking lot to this particular place, and it's right across from the street that leads into the sororities and the fraternities. What this will do if we add a parking lot here, it'll add additional traffic to an already narrow road. If you've ever had the misfortune of having to use Walnut to just go down it, thinking you're going to get onto 6th Street, I invite you to try sometime, because when there was the development near 4th Street, when that was approved and added, originally there was no on-street parking there, and it was great. It was like a new day had dawned in the neighborhood. You could go both ways up and down the street, and then magically parking was allowed back on the street again in front of one of the duplexes that was built there, even though there's built-in parking behind there. On-street parking is allowed on Walnut, despite each of the rental properties having off-street parking. As you near 6th Street going south, you will note the narrow street is restricted to tight two-way traffic. While the housing units built there, and they're very nice, if you ever built those are very nice. They seem to be well maintained for the time they've been there. Don't have a problem with the structure themselves. But again, while the housing units built there have off-street parking, neither of the buildings have marked parking, and cars are parked in a haphazard manner. These lots are adjacent to a parking lot for a sorority. Despite their parking lot, you daily see vehicles parked on both sides of the street, despite the best efforts of code enforcement. So you've already got a narrow street. You've already allowed a sorority to build a parking lot there. You've got now it's 3 really nice rental units there. But if you'll go by and look at their parking, they don't even have it marked. All they have is asphalt. So whoever lives there, if you go by there on a daily basis, as I do, sometimes they're parked facing north, sometimes east, sometimes south. It's just whoever first couple of cars get there determine the direction they'll be parking in any of those lots. They're simply not marked. And again, if you're going south on the right-hand side where there's expected to be no parking, and it's marked with signs that clearly say no parking, daily our cars are parked there. I believe that's what will happen if you allow this parking lot to be built there, because there is already on-street parking right across from there in Old Tower Park. I've been here so long. I've been in the house that I'm in for 25, 28 years. I've been here so long, I still remember when there was a tower there in Tower Park. Allowing a parking lot at this location opens the remainder of Walnut to this change and will fundamentally change the neighborhood to the north and west. When building or approving their houses, I think both fraternities and sororities should look a little closer to their properties that are near them, particularly when they're adding on to their buildings. I think they should take a closer look at their membership. Does their house support the membership they've got in the building? My daughter had the good fortune to be in a a sorority right there next to Tower Park. I paid for my daughter to live about 50 yards away from me. Well, first, and then when she was done there, she rented a house across the street from me. So I'm not quite sure what she was trying to say to me, but I know this. She parked her car in our driveway even though she lived 50 yards away from us. It was a lot easier. So I realized they have some real parking problems, but many of the fraternities and sororities do not. I think, again, as someone has already mentioned, I think it needs, I think those organizations need to take a look at how they're allocating living spaces and parking spaces. Let me see. The fact that no one, yeah, I just want to talk a couple of flaws in logic I heard here tonight. I heard from the representative for the builder that there's only going to be 14 parking spaces there, as if that's really a heartfelt gesture on their part. Well, we're only going to put 14 there, but we could put 20 if we wanted to, if we faced them differently, if we arranged it differently. But as a favor to everybody in the neighborhood, we're only going to put 14. And we're also going to put some drainage in there that should be an expected part of that building either. And also the fact that no one else has proposed a project since they proposed this project has no bearing on the potential construction of additional parking lots or apartments. What I think I heard was, well, we proposed this and people are worried that it's going to cause an expansion down the street, but nobody else has proposed it but us, so we shouldn't be worried if you live in the neighborhood. I think that's what I heard. That seems like a little bit of a red herring to me. What's really going on there is that, yeah, they're the test. Will the neighborhood rise up and say, this fundamentally changes our neighborhood, or do we want this? So I think that's a fundamental flaw in their logic. Then I also heard it's a safer walk for students in the sorority. That's an outstanding idea. We want people to be safe in Stillwater, whether they're walking from a building and their car's 10 feet away or whether their car's half a block away. But again, that's a bit of a red herring to bring up the safety factor, when what they could do is look at the parking that they have now, re-examine it, and is it well lit? Have they built it in a way that allows more parking where they currently have parking for the young ladies in their sororities? Tri-Delt does. If you look at that on your aerial map here, if you look at theirs, their girls have plenty of space. And they could reconfigure that if they needed to. So in the end, what I'm asking you to do is not fundamentally change the neighborhood to the west. A 6-foot fence wouldn't do it. I live on University. My bedroom is at the very back of my house, and as is Mrs. Nash back here. She's on that corner, and I'm right in the middle. And anything that goes on to either side of us, it's like a megaphone. I hear it every night. And I've got a 6-foot fence, and a 6-foot fence wouldn't do it. So I'm urging you to reject this proposal for a parking lot at 302 South Walnut. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments on item 2C? That's it. I close the public hearing on item 2C. I open the public hearing on item 2D, which is specific use permit. Is anybody here going to speak in favor of this item? Not seeing anyone. Is there anybody here that would like to speak in opposition or make comments associated with this item?
Good evening. I'm Brenda Masters. My primary residence is 14320 East Jost Road, Glencoe. My second home is directly behind the property of interest at 221 South Orchard. I think the evidence that's presented tonight that's the most clear is the aerial photo. An aerial photo of a tree canopy with a grid cut right in the side of it. It was kind of sad to see that. I hadn't seen that aerial photo. And tonight when I saw it, I thought, well, that pretty much says it. Make a big cut right into a mature tree canopy on the back side of the only preserved neighborhood in Stillwater. As you know, last spring there was massive flooding west of Stillwater, and 12th was closed for several weeks. And you know, I know this one house lot will not save the flooding that will occur in the future, but the reality is a drain on the southwest thankfully will not be on our property, but regretfully will be in the cook's backyard. These blocks were not gridded to have a parking lot on the back. When those lots were initially gridded, they were gridded out for student housing on the quarter blocks just like they are. I have found it offensive for people to identify those rental homes as something less because they're single-family rentals for our students. And the three-quarter block houses that stand behind them are some of the most important historic homes in Stillwater. So again, we're here to ask that you help us preserve Westwood overlay and prevent the destruction on the east side. And also, as has been mentioned earlier, there are other options for parking. One of the fraternity houses bought 75 parking spots in the Wentz Lane parking hall for all of their members. It's unrealistic to devastate one of our standing neighborhoods and then put 6-foot wooden fences around it. I cannot imagine how unattractive that is. But the reality is, people have mentioned the parking lot, the FIMU parking lot that's at the corner of 4th, that's 2 blocks down from University. That parking lot does have 20 spaces. I have gone by there almost every day for a year and a half. There's never been more than 5 cars there. Not everybody who sleeps at a sorority house is parked there all at the same time. And the reality is, it would be wonderful if everybody who had a bed in Stillwater had a convenient parking spot, but that is in fact not possible. I don't speak just on behalf of the properties that are adjacent to the lot. I don't speak just on behalf of Westwood or on behalf of Stillwater and the area around Stillwater. I speak on behalf of Stillwater.
Do I have any other speakers on item 2D? Not seeing other speakers, I'd like to close the public hearing on item 2D. Does the applicant want to come up and say anything?
Yes, thank you. So I will just note that the sorority specifically did not choose a lot within the Westwood Overlay District, as parking lots are not allowed within the Westwood Overlay District. There are several neighborhoods around town that backs up to parking lots. Just trying to think of some while I was sitting here in the meeting. I believe it's called Oakdale Park, that's on the west side of town. It backs up. It's there behind El Vaquero, that area over there behind I think it's Motel 6. Their parking lot directly backs up to a whole street within that subdivision. I know my mother-in-law lives actually with her backyard backing up to that Motel 6. That street is thriving. It hasn't affected the property resale values in that area. Adding parking lot to the city of Stillwater does help the city of Stillwater in taking cars off of parking on the street. In regards to the office zoning district, the building setbacks are such that a business could not actually be located within this property due to the narrow width of the property and the setbacks required in office zoning districts. So more properties would have to be purchased, and those properties would come before you with rezoning issues or requests. So nothing is happening on that property without further public hearings. We would be happy to construct a taller fence along that west property line. 6 foot is standard within residential subdivisions, so we were trying to not stand out, but we would be happy to build probably an 8 foot. I don't know at what height structural changes take place, but I think it would be the 8 foot. Anybody that's taller than a car, well, the 6 foot is as well, but that would be an additional item. On-street parking, we're not proposing any on-street parking in front of our property. I believe there is currently, well, we front an intersection, so there's no street on the other side of this property, but I believe there is on-street parking on the east side of Walnut, up and down. Our parking lot will be marked with the spaces designated. I believe the trouble to the south with on-street parking was due to the newer multifamily structures that are there and just the multitude of people coming and going from the homes there. The number that we settled on and the orientation of our parking spaces were actually for the safety of our residences. We didn't want any wrecks happening because they were backing into Walnut. And so that's why we settled on that number of spaces. And the sorority is currently renting spaces from OSU, but I think you can relate to any smart business or homeowner that if you're paying rent on something and you have the opportunity to decrease that amount of rent by building something long-term that would help you save money, then that is a better option. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions of the applicant? Not seeing any questions. Staff, why don't you come up and address item 2C only and the alternatives for it.
Okay, so with regard to the map amendment, the findings are that the applicant, of course, is asking for a rezoning to office. That is necessary to allow development that they propose, which is a surface parking lot, if an SUP is approved. It's zoned RSS right now. It is adjacent to RTM, RMI, which is multifamily intermediate. It also abuts the Westwood overlay district. With regard to alternatives, you can find that the map amendment is in order and reasonable and recommend approval. You can find that it's not reasonable and recommend denial. You can table the item to a particular date later if you feel additional information is required or additional discussion is necessary. Any questions I can answer?
Any questions for the staff? Planning Commission, it's now to discussion and a motion.
I was, when it came up here 2 months ago, I was for it at that point, so I'm probably not, a person to talk to on this. So, there was opposition on the Planning Commission previous to this.
Well, I don't think changing the zoning to office changes anything. I think the staff recommendation as the second alternative succinctly states what I think, that the map amendment is not an appropriate use of the property based on the impact to the surrounding vicinity. I think many of the speakers eloquently stated fragility of the neighborhood, the ongoing process of revitalization of the neighborhood, and that the parking lot would have an impact on this. And I think the impact would be cumulative over a period of time. Again, I think a couple of people mentioned we need to take the long-term view, which we do, rather than just see it as a short-term solution. And I think also, although the Planning Commission cannot dictate this, obviously, or really has purview over this, I think we're not even looking at a true root cause solution to this parking issue in the area. Certainly, I think the recommendation that the university community, the Greek community, the city look at alternatives to just incrementally sticking in parking lots in residential lots. I don't think that's a solution to anything. So I do not support this action.
Any other discussion or comment?
Motion to deny.
I second that.
Any discussion on the motion? Let's call for the vote. We have 2 yeses and 3 noes. So, let's go back a moment and restate the motion is and what you're voting for. The motion was for denial, and there was a second. So if you vote yes, you're going for denial. If you vote no, you're against that particular motion for denial. So let's revote.
I think that would be wise.
With that,
Rookie mistake.
with that clarification.
Yeah.
I think that would be appropriate.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Is that okay, legal?
Somebody needs to make a motion to reconsider.
Motion to reconsider.
Second that motion to reconsider.
Vote on that motion.
There's a motion to reconsider so we can revote. Let's have that up. The motion to reconsider is passed by 5-0. So do you want to make a motion?
Motion to deny.
Second the motion.
There's a motion to deny. A vote yes will be for denial. A vote no will be against this motion.
Right.
Let's vote.
You've run out.
No, she's still got to reset it.
Yeah. Okay.
The motion passes 3-2. Therefore, the rezoning has been denied from the Planning Commission, the recommendation. So the SUP, since the motion failed, do we vote on it or not, Attorney?
Yes, it's on there. I can predict the outcome, but since they're...
So, do I hear a discussion or a motion on the SUP?
I then move that we deny the request of the SUP 19-29.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
So if you're voting yes, you're voting for the denial. If you're voting no, you're voting against the motion. The motion passed. The motion to deny has been approved. We have item 2E, CHS Management Map Amendment MA 19-10, requesting review and approval of a map amendment to rezone the portion of land currently addressed as 1798 North Payne Street from residential 2-family to residential single-family small lot. Staff?
Chairman Ryan Harkins, Community Development. This is a request for a map amendment on the east side of the community. You can see an outline of the subject property for the larger development in the black hatch pattern. Within that, you will see 2 zoning districts. A lighter and a darker yellow. The darker area is the area subject for rezoning. You can see on the aerial, the outline in red, that is the area that again is up for the rezoning request. It is part of a larger development package going through the review process right now. At this point in time, staff's going to yield the floor to the agent for the applicant or the applicant themselves to further explain their request.
Good evening, Commissioners. Stephen Gose with Gose & Associates, 113 East 8th Avenue. Here on behalf of the applicant, we're the engineer for the project. As staff report states, and is shown on the screen, there's a current piece of zoning RT for 2-family duplex. It's about 100 feet wide, 1,300 feet long. originally intended as a buffer between the industrial zoning and the ag zoning on the east side of this. As part of the development, you'll see a preliminary plat next month come through. We're requesting to rezone that to small lot, single family, consistent with the rest of the tract, to allow the construction of single family homes on the minimum of 50 by 100 lots. The lots right now are proposed to be a little deeper, but current zoning would allow 60-foot wide lots, so, and allow duplexes. This would take out that allowance for duplexes and just be single family homes. So here to answer any questions you may have now or after the public hearing.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me open the public hearing on item 2E. Is anybody here to speak in favor of this particular item? See no one? Is anyone here to speak in opposition or to make any comments on this item? Please approach the podium and give your name and address.
My name is Simon Ringsmith. I live at 1705 East Linda Avenue. Members of the Planning Commission, thank you for your time. We appreciate it very much. In a sense, there's not a whole lot of point to us being here tonight since we're just talking a rezoning issue. We're not talking approval of a plat. But this development is in process, as the previous gentleman just stated, and several of us here in the neighborhood are here to express our opinion on the direction of this development. Development of this area should take into account a couple things which we're not seeing. Number one, school zones. The plat you have that's been submitted almost certainly does not include any exits onto Jardot, because that is not part of this particular rezoning. If we're going to put over 100, I've heard as many as 130 homes in this area, and expect all of those cars to exit onto Skyline or Sunrise Avenue, which has recently been redone, not up to code, and is not able to handle this volume of traffic, then that, in a sense, it shouldn't even be considered in the first place, because most of those houses are going to have traffic that wants to get to an artery street like Jardot. And if that's not possible through the rezoning and redevelopment of this, then it seems like it shouldn't even be considered. Any development of this area will certainly incur greater traffic onto Payne Avenue. And Payne Avenue is in rough shape, as many of the residents here will tell you. Doesn't have sidewalks. It's in pretty bad shape from a structural perspective. Development of this area needs to take these issues into account, and we're not seeing that. The developer, as far as I can tell, is CHC Management, LLC, being represented here by Ghost & Associates. As far as I can tell, they're a firm out of Fort Worth, Texas. It seems like they are looking for easy money, quick development of a neighborhood that is not consistent with the current norms established in the neighborhood. I recommend that any development take these issues into account. My message is responsible development. We know that this will be developed eventually. And that means it must include exits to Jardot. If we're looking at development of this area and the developer has not submitted a plan that includes exits to Jardot, which is the main artery, it shouldn't even be considered. And if that means rezoning the industrial area, then fine. We got to have those cars have easy access to Jardot. If that's not part of the package, then the package should be dismissed outright until that issue is addressed. Exiting on a Crayler, exiting on a Sunrise, that doesn't fix the problem. We're talking elementary schools, Title I elementary schools. My kids go to that school. They walk to school. Hundreds of kids in that area walk to school. If we're talking a huge increase in traffic as a result of this proposed development, because those cars can't get to Jardot and they're driving through school zones, we're putting lives at risk, little kids' lives at risk, so an out-of-state developer can make some money. We shouldn't allow that. I recommend following a model similar to Oakdale Park 2. Oakdale Park is not on the west side of town, as was stated earlier. It's on the east side of town. Trey McCune, former planning commissioner, has done a fantastic job developing that particular plot of land and recommend seeking his input on developing this plot of land. I thank you for your time, and thank you to all the residents who from the area who came out to speak about this. And yes, I realize we're not approving a plat tonight. We're just talking rezoning, but it's all part of the same package here. And if we're not doing this responsibly, we're going to damage this neighborhood and put lives at risk because it just can't handle it. Thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak on this particular item? Not here on a closed.
Wait, no, somebody, he stood up.
I am sorry, I didn't notice you. Come on up.
Come on.
My name is Ben Snoller-Esky, and I live on 1223 North Payne. And this street, I'm going to try to keep it simple. This street is not a true street. It ends at Linda Lane and Sunrise. So any traffic coming out of this new allotment, going through North Payne Street, you still have to take a left at Linda Lane or a right to go to Skyline. So all you're doing is delaying the distance to get to Jardot or Skyline Street. So the best thing to do is not to have this traffic go through North Payne, but just go straight to, from this new allotment to Jardot. Because all you're doing is just zigzagging to get to Jardot, no matter where you're going. You have to go back to Jardot or Skyline to get out of North Payne Street. So that's all I want to say.
Yes, sir.
I'm Don Murray, and I live at 1402 North Payne Street. I've lived in that house for just slightly over 30 years now. One thing that hasn't been mentioned about this plat is if you look at the south end of that, as it's eventually this area will probably be developed, but that is a major drainage area. And so whatever is done in terms of planning in the future ought to take into account that drainage. And I don't know that that's been addressed at all in this petition, but I did want to at least bring that to the attention of the Planning Commission. Thank you all for your time and allowing me to speak.
Anybody else that'd like to speak on this item? Now, I don't see anyone now. So I will close the public hearing. Does the applicant representative want to come up here and make any comments?
Just a couple of items. One, the developer for this is out of Stillwater. It's a 3-member partnership. One of them's a local resident and business owner. One's his brother who lives in Owasso. I'm not sure who the third partner is. I've just been dealing with those two. So the CHC management is an entity they created for this project. The drainage and the traffic will be addressed with the preliminary plat and the final plats as they come through. With the preliminary plat was submitted a preliminary drainage study. We've got comments back on that from staff that we are working through addressing this week that we'll get back to city staff prior to the January meeting of this body. And then the traffic will be addressed with the final plat. Right now, the thoroughfare plan doesn't show Crayler or anything extending to Jardot. This property is landlocked on the east. Hopefully the traffic study can address any possible improvements, but again, that's a separate consideration. This is a map amendment purely, but just so you all know that those items are not being ignored, they're being worked on, and we'll address them appropriately.
So as I understand, this is a map amendment to go to what's referred to as downgrading the zoning from residential 2-family to residential single-family. Am I correct?
You are correct, sir.
Okay. And the connections and how many connections and the drainage and the traffic will be addressed through the platting stage.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant?
Thank you.
Staff, you want to get up and go over the...
So, as stated, the proposal is to take a strip of a larger plot of a larger tract of land and rezone it from RT to RSS. The map amendment is a necessary step to do that. That is the legal process under the Land Development Code. The property next to it, to the west, is RSS, so this would be just as you mentioned, a downzoning. It's part of a larger development that the applicant is looking at doing to RSS standards in order to have the entire potential plat happen in that way. The rezoning is necessary. As far as alternatives, what you can look at is a finding that it is within the boundaries of the Land Development Code and recommend approval to City Council. You can find that it's not a reasonable request and recommend denial. You can also find that there's additional information needed or additional discussion required and table the item to a certain date later. Questions staff can answer at this time.
Any questions of staff? Do I hear some discussion or a motion on item 2E?
I move that we accept the findings and recommend the City Council approve the proposed map as presented.
Second.
Call for the vote. Motion passes 5-0. Item 3A, regular meeting summary of December 3rd, 2019. Discussion or motion?
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
I second that.
Call for the vote.
There you go. Trick just with your finger.
Motion passes 4 yeses, 1 abstain. Next Plan Commission meeting is January 7th, 2020, next year. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Jump in if you want to get on it.
Come on,
Somebody's
do
got a second.
somebody
Somebody's got a
second
Don't
that.
let it die by a second.
Motion passes 5-0. We stand adjourned. Thank you.